have a picture.
And tonight's special guest, as you may have guessed from our opening Live Aid version of Hold Me Now, is an artist who appeared at Live Aid on the Philadelphia stage that picked up where Wembley left off, if you remember. Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins, welcome.
Jackie, hello. How are you?
I'm well. Are you in New Zealand?
No, I just arrived in London, so we're in the same time zone.
Ah, right, okay, because a couple of times we were trying to work out which one of us would have to stay up in our PJs in order to converse.
That's right, it's difficult, isn't it?
Oh, of course you're here. You've just played Chillfest in Tring this past weekend, right? And this coming weekend you're in Kildare in Ireland at the Forever Young Festival. The lineup is incredible. I mean, the lineups for all of these festivals are so star-studded. They've become so huge themselves, and they're massively popular events.
Yes. I can remember the days when there were just kind of one or two festivals of the summertime, and now they're every 5 minutes, aren't they? But and there's a risk, actually, that there may be too many. But it's interesting, isn't it, how we Brits have taken to the festival as a kind of event that marks the summertime for us all. And it's an opportunity to go out into the countryside, usually go a bit wild, have a good time. Remember the good old days. And in fact, the festivals I'm doing are pretty much all focusing on music from the 80s. So it'll definitely pull that audience in.
And how many songs do you usually play in the set?
Oh, my gosh, it depends on what time we're given, you know. That's an interesting question. But, you know, in festivals, it's not necessarily all my audience. So I tend to rely on the hits, particularly, because they're the things that everyone will know.
Yeah, of course.
I think with the festival crowd, I can't just start playing new music they've never heard before, you know. That would be asking too much.
There's such a renaissance, a kind of a new love affair that's currently going on with 80s music, and it's had its moments. 80s music, you know, has been sort of regarded as cheesy over the decades, a little bit naff, and then suddenly I think there's been a realization of that was very creative, that was very inspiring, that was very different.
Yes, and yeah, you're right. The 80s was a time of remarkable change. And in fact, now I look at it as a bit of a golden age.
Yeah. Because
there was something about the arrival of new technology, especially drum machines and synthesizers and stuff, that coupled with a new interest in pop music rather than guitar thrashing kind of punk and post-punk. So it was a very, very interesting time. And I think a lot of assumptions were kind of dropped at that point as well, and people kind of really got creative. The problem was that the hairstyles and padded shoulders put off the kind of battle-hardened pop critics, you know, music critics, and they saw it as somehow superficial. So
let's start with the influences that you had that sort of led you to becoming a part of that extraordinary wave of music that began in the 80s, and many artists continuing on 40 years hence. Do you remember the first pop record you ever bought?
I think it was a Beatles EP, the Magical Mystery Tour. And I must have been, you know, a young teenager at school, and it was vaguely. I mean, I was very late coming to pop music. Actually, you know, I kind of turned away from it as a youngster because I was already involved in kind of classical music and stuff. And I think I listened too much to my elders who said, "Oh no, you don't want to go there," and I was a little bit of a snob about it all, you know. But then. I think when the Beatles, I mean, obviously the Beatles did fantastic work before this point, but when they became a kind of psychedelic experimental band, around about the time of Sgt. Pepper's and Magical Mystery Tour and stuff, then I found it absolutely engaging and irresistible, you know.
The Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour from 1967, the first record ever bought by tonight's special guest, Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins. Do you remember your first live gig?
Well, I was lucky to live in a small town. I lived in a small town, Chesterfield, in Derbyshire. And the luck I'm talking about came from the fact that the local record store owner put on gigs on a Saturday night in the local dance hall. and his interest was in the kind of
right,
the new wave of blues and progressive music that was happening at the time. So all sorts of bands that are now kind of world famous made it through this tiny little town's Saturday night hop, And the first one I can remember was...
Oh, how extraordinary.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was completely influential down to this one guy who's still around, and I must meet him and thank him sometime. But the one I can remember being amongst the first, if it wasn't absolutely the first, was Free, with Paul Rodgers and all the rest of them, singing kind of, British blues rock.
Right.
And defining that very well. And I seem to remember they sang their big hit All Right Now, and it was wonderful.
There she stood in the street. All right now, baby, it's
All Right Now, a 1970 hit for Free, and an incredible memory for our guest tonight, seeing that band at his very first live gig in the local dance hall in Chesterfield. And we will be back with more great conversation from Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles. We are mid-great conversation with Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins, who lives in New Zealand mostly, but is currently in the UK for festival season, luckily for us. And before the break, Tom, we were hearing about your early musical influences. So when you became a part of the music scene yourself and you were starting to make some kind of headway, who would your contemporaries have been at that point?
As I say, I grew up in a place called Chesterfield, which was just 12 miles away from Sheffield, which was a really happening music scene.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And at the time, there was a kind of a corporate rock band to be called Def Leppard down the road. There was an interesting synth band called the Human League just down the road. Very, very interesting group of people. But of course, being British, we refuse to acknowledge each other.
Oh, I was going to say, were you all meeting down the pub afterwards or no?
No. Only years later did we kind of admit to all of that. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing. It felt like a small and intense scene, but so many of those bands went on to become world renowned.
Human League with their first top 20 hit, Sound of the Crowd, which broke through for them in May 1981, with the Thompson Twins nipping at their heels about 18 months later. And when you did break through, when you had that first big success, do you still have a clear memory of either, I don't know, the first time you heard your record on the radio or the first time you did Top of the Pops? When you sort of thought, oh my God, this is it, I'm making it? Right,
it took a while to sink in, to be honest, because we'd had some success in America that we weren't there. We just heard that one of our records was doing well there.
Yeah.
And we thought, oh yeah, whatever, great, we've got a record going well in America. But that didn't really sink in until we also had a chart hit here in the UK. And I remember actually someone saying, enjoy the ride, because this moment only lasts for, you only get it once.
Yeah, yeah.
The second time round, it's not the same giddy elevator ride that the first one is. And so we got that moment with a song called Love on Your Side, which went zooming into the UK charts.
And can you remember either the first big show that you did, or that first moment when suddenly you knew things had changed almost overnight? Things had changed. You were being recognised. You were in demand.
Yeah. Well, what happened was I was already a kind of battle-hardened touring musician.
Yeah.
But without really massive success. I mean, there was success on the kind of alternative and student circuit, maybe.
Yeah.
But I could still walk down the street without it causing any kind of fuss. And I think that's the kind of stupid thing that makes you realise you've put your foot in it big time, is when you can't go shopping without drawing a crowd.
Yeah.
And I think something like that happened to me. And is this what's going to be, life is going to be like? But of course, it's all very exciting. It's all very well to sound kind of grumpy about it now, but that was incredibly exciting. The idea that you couldn't go down Oxford Street without a bodyguard, you know.
Yeah.
Stupid now, but that's how it was.
I hear you laughing in some other room, and it makes me love on your side. You got love.
Love on Your Side. That was the single that catapulted the Thompson Twins into the public consciousness. From what the conversations that I've had with, you know, artists like yourself from this era, that over and over again, people sort of saying that you get that moment. And yes, there are sort of dream come true moments, whether that's meeting, you know, a musical hero of yours that suddenly now appear, or whether that's playing an incredible gig. But then there is that moment when you are sort of go through the looking glass and realize, ooh, I did not expect this to be a part of the deal. And there's kind of no going back, and that is part of the deal, and it can be quite tough.
I know. I mean, I have to say, when all this was happening, I was still living in a squat in South London. And I became so busy and so obsessive about the music that I never found the time to actually find somewhere to live. You know, so I still rather embarrassingly living for free in a room in an abandoned house in Clapham. And
how amazing!
It became sufficiently embarrassing, you know, when we were being kind of taken back from TV shows in limousines to a squat. And we thought, you know, we really have to move out of here and find somewhere a bit more respectable to live. It's not fair, apart from anything else, because someone else needs the space.
Did you have one of those lovely full circle moments where you did find yourself playing alongside or meeting or collaborating with somebody that you'd previously admired before you got that big break?
Yes, I think early on in our three-piece success, for example, I was invited to play a gig with David Bowie in Scotland, actually, in Edinburgh.
Oh, wow.
I was thrilled to meet him, and it seemed like a strange thing because, of course, I was self-obsessed and had been for quite some time, you know, concentrating on my own work, and then realising that there was someone who was a million miles more important and famous than I was on the same stage. Was a kind of sobering moment.
Did you play with him?
No, just before him.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to, you know, and everyone says, did you meet David? Did you meet David? He arrived by car just before he was about to play, and his car drove up a ramp onto the stage. He got out of the car, walked past me, nodded, grabbed a microphone and started singing.
Golden Years from David Bowie, and Watching from the Wings and Learning from the Maestro was our special guest tonight, Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins, and we'll be back with more great conversation from Tom, including his memories of Live Aid next. Welcome back to the great conversation on the evening show with Jackie Brambles, and throughout this week we are celebrating the 38th anniversary of the legendary Live Aid concert. But tonight's special guest, Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins, was on the other side of the Atlantic on stage at the JFK Stadium in Philadelphia, right?
That's right. Because we happened to be in New York working on an album with Nile Rodgers in his studio. So to come back to London and do the Wembley show would have been impractical for those reasons. So we asked if we could do Philadelphia, and it worked out well.
Yeah, you had quite an impressive backup singer, as I recall.
Well, I mean, one of the...
Didn't Niall bring another one of his
That's right.
co-workers on stage?
As a result of being in New York, well, first of all, we got the David Letterman Band as our backing group because they weren't working that night. Because normally they're on every TV night of the year, but because of Live Aid, they weren't playing that night, so they were free to do that. And Steve Stevens, the guitarist from Billy Idol's band, was free, so he joined us. Nile Rodgers was playing guitar with us, and then he just worked with Madonna. So we did this deal where we sang backing vocals on her set, and she sang them on ours, which is kind of one of those things you just arrange backstage, you know.
It just happened.
Half an hour before you go on. Yeah.
All right, people of the world, are you ready? Yes, to the beat, what will it be?
Given the size of the global audience watching and the sort of the spectacle and the import, actually, that it had at that point, It's kind of bananas that you're just kind of throwing it together 30 minutes beforehand.
Yes.
Backstage. But I think that's what was so great to see.
Yes, things like that do happen, you know. So it's good to jump on opportunities like if you can figure it out. Yeah.
Niall's a remarkable character. We've had him on the show quite a few times, and I think that we should rename the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I think it should be the 6 degrees of Nile Rodgers, because nearly everybody can sort of connect the dots to him in either one or two moves. He's a really sort of clearly he's a hugely talented musical individual. But what was the experience like for you being sort of working with him?
Well, I love Niall dearly, and you're right, he is enormously talented as a musician, quite extraordinarily so. I mean, you know, one of a handful of people with that kind of talent. However, when I worked with him, he was at the bottom of his kind of drug and alcohol curve. So it was a difficult moment.
Right, yeah, he's talked about that.
There were, you know, it's really tough times as a result of that. Nevertheless, he was always brilliantly inspired in the studio. Sometimes he was a bit late turning up, but when he turned up, he was great. And I learned a lot from him in terms of actually the simplicity of great musical ideas.
Do you have a favourite Chic song? Or?
So many, but the one that I always love is Good Times, because of the fantastic bass line from his partner Bernard Edwards, and the way that it fits with the guitar line. So actually, when I met Niall, I said, "You've got to teach me how to play that part, because I can't quite get it right," you know. So I like to play Good Times as well.
Good times. These are the good.
And just to finish, as we always do, we ask every artist that we have on, Tom, this question, and I have to apologise in advance because it's not an easy one to answer as a musician. It's like asking you to choose a favourite child. A song that never fails to inspire or uplift or comfort or just do what it says on the tin for you time after time. Would you be able to select one?
You know, I'd just be stabbing, not in the dark, but into a pile of millions of songs and just picking one out, you know. Because there are so many that mean so much to me. But I seem to be on a kind of Beatles tip at the moment, so I'm going to pick one of theirs and say The Long and Winding Road. I've got lots of stories about that song, but maybe we'll just let the music speak for itself.
Come on, let's finish on a great story.
So someone I knew quite closely died tragically, and I was asked to do the music arrangements for their funeral. And so I did, and I pulled out all the stops, almost literally, because I played the organ in the church and asked someone else to sing along with me and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of organising all this, so the only thing we haven't got is what music shall we play when the coffin arrives with the remains of our departed friend? And I suddenly thought, wow, she was a Beatles fan. How about The Long and Winding Road That Leads to Your Door? It's perfect, you know. So I looked for my copy of the CD. The cover was there, but someone had nicked the CD itself. So I ran down to the town and bought, couldn't get that, but bought a Beatles compilation with it on.
Right.
Came back, put it in the sound system of the church. And while we were waiting for the funeral to begin, for the hearse to arrive, the vicar, in order to save electricity, turned off the sound system.
No.
Okay.
No.
I didn't know this had happened, so I just pressed play on the CD player, and along with someone carrying the coffin into the church came Back in the USSR.
Oh, no.
Full volume, which I don't know if you remember, starts with a kind of jet flying overhead. And it was the perfect kind of weird joke moment that my friend would have loved had she still been alive.
The long and winding.
The Beatles, The Long and Winding Road from 1970. A great final pick from you, Tom. Listen, it's been an absolute delight having you join our great conversation tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your memories, particularly of Live Aid, as we celebrate its 38th anniversary this week.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Take care now.
And you can see Tom Bailey and all his Thompson Twins glory at the Forever Young Festival in Kildare, Ireland this weekend.